Implementing the dividend discount equation. To apply the dividend discount model equation, you calculate the present value of a company's future dividend payments by dividing the next expected dividend by the difference between your required rate of return, R, and the expected dividend growth rate, G. Essentially, the formula is stock value equals D1 divided by R minus G, where D1 represents the next year's expected dividend per share. This gives you an estimated intrinsic value of the stock based on its future dividend streamed. Key points about using the DDM. Assumptions. The model assumes that a company's dividend will grow at a constant rate indefinitely. Limitations. The DDM is most useful for companies with consistent dividend payouts and predictable growth rates. It may not be accurate for companies with volatile dividends or high growth phases. How to use the DDM. Estimate the next dividend per share, D1. Find the most recent dividend paid and project its future growth based on historic trends or company forecasts. Determine the required rate of return. This represents the minimum return an investor expects for the level of risk associated with the stock, often calculated using the capital asset pricing model. Estimate the dividend growth rate. This is the expected rate at which the company's dividends will grow in the future. Plug the values into the formula. Divide the next expected dividend, D1, by the difference between the required rate of return, R, and the dividend growth rate, G, to get the estimated intrinsic value of the stock. To apply the dividend discount model, DDM equation, you calculate the present value of a company's future dividend payments by dividing the next expected dividend per share by the difference between the required rate of return, R, and the dividend growth rate, G. Essentially, the formula is again stock value equals next dividend per share divided by R minus G. This gives you the intrinsic value of a stock based on the assumption that dividends will grow at a constant rate into the future. Key points about the DDM. Inputs needed. Next dividend per share. The expected dividend a company will pay in the next period. Required rate of return, R. The minimum return an investor expects for a given level of risk. Dividend growth rate, G. The expected rate at which the company's dividends will grow annually. Assumptions. The company will pay dividends perpetually. The dividend growth rate is constant. For example, if a company is expected to pay a dividend of $2 per share next year, has a required rate of return of 10%, and a constant dividend growth rate of 5%, the stock value would be calculated as stock value equals 2 divided by 0.10 minus 0.5, or $40 per share. Important considerations. Limitations. The DDM is most useful for companies with stable dividend growth and can be less accurate for companies with volatile dividend payouts or high growth rates. Multi-stage models. To account for different growth phases, investors can use a multi-stage DDM, which applies different growth rates to different time periods.